The early to mid-2000s was the era of the Game Boy Advance, a handheld console for people who like to play video games on the go, but only under direct sunlight because the screen on the original model was nigh on impossible to view without a clear summer's day, or like studio quality lighting. Sega had just entered the market as a third party, so of course they were going to develop games for anything, and as a result they made some GBA games. But here's the thing about Sega games on the GBA, they're really weird. Occasionally Sega did make something good for the system, but a lot of the time it was just weird. So let's take a look at some weird Sega games on the GBA. Altered Beast: Guardian of the Realms was released in 2002 and developed by 3D6 Games. It is a direct sequel to the original game, but it uses pre-rendered graphics and tries to expand the action of the original title into a more substantial experience. What ends up happening is you basically play a version of Altered Beast that has ugly graphics, the stages go on for far too long, and the bosses take forever to defeat. They have added some power-ups that aren't just the same as the originals you beef up 2 times and then turn into a beast, an altered beast if you will, but they're largely inconsequential and don't really do much to add variety to the game. This is just another tedious side-scrolling beat-em-up set in ancient Rome, which to the game's credit is a damn sight better than the 2005 PS2 game that came next, and completely forgot that one of the most unique things about Altered Beast is it's set in ancient Rome. Column's Crown is certainly a puzzle game you can play on the GBA. Originally released in 2001, this is basically the same concept as what happened with Altered Beast: Guardian of the Realms. We get a sequel to an old Sega game with pre-rendered visuals. The only real difference in presentation is that you play as little anime children instead, and there's more of a focus on battling other characters in head-to-head columns action. But it's columns, so it's just fine. If you like matching coloured jewels in diagonals, rows and columns, that's the name of the game, then this does that. Column's Crown is certainly a puzzle game that actually functions. The best thing I can say about it is it's well put together. Glowing praise! The Phantasy Star Collection, developed by Digital Eclipse and released in 2002, bundles the original game with Phantasy Star 2 and 3 Generations of Doom, and lets you play 3 of Sega's classic RPGs wherever you want under direct sunlight. It's pretty cool having 3 massive games in your pocket, but this isn't really the best way to play them. For starters, the original game is using some weird interlacing effect to crush the visuals into the GBA screen resolution, which creates some shimmering that's a little harsh on the eyes. 2 and 3 favour a cropped view of the original visuals that is certainly less shimmery, but also means you never see much of the map on screen, and makes everything feel very cramped. It's easy to get lost as well, so it's quite a testing way to play these games. This is still an impressive amount of game to cram into one GBA cartridge, but the execution is a bit lacking. The Pinball of the Dead is so close to being the first banger on this list, but it falls short in a few places. Firstly, the positives. It's a gosh dang pinball game that draws influence from the House of the Dead 1 and 2, and that's just rad as all hell. The presentation is so spot on, and the GBA's approximation of the soundtracks is actually really well done, which is not something you get to say about music on the GBA that much. The tables are set up similarly to Devil Crash, in that they feature 3 play areas stacked on top of each other, and you can enter bonus areas to do battle with bosses that are also drawn directly from House of the Dead 1 and 2. Developer Eighting has done a great job of making this feel like House of the Dead, but sadly, pinball games aren't well suited to the GBA, thanks to its landscape screen orientation, and pinball tables generally being long vertically orientated things. This means the screen has to scroll around a lot and it becomes quite disorientating. It's not terrible by any means, but it's not really the optimum way to play a pinball game on the GBA, something that the entire genre falls foul of on this system.
So this is Goldman's headquarters. Get back! Help!
3D6 Games are back to butcher another classic Sega franchise with the Revenge of Shinobi for GBA, released in 2002. Despite sharing the same name as the Mega Drive original, this is not a port of it. We actually get a brand new Shinobi game with pre-rendered visuals and just the slowest, most unresponsive controls you could want for a precise action game like Shinobi. This feels like the most generic ninja game any developer could create, and to help it sell better, Sega have decided to slap the Shinobi franchise on it despite how ill-fitting it is. Without being attached to the Shinobi franchise, you might get some basic enjoyment out of this ninja action game, but it cannot even compete in the same wheelhouse as the game it takes its name from. And my word is it ugly. Finally, let's take a look at Sega Smash Pack, which bundles together 3 of the most randomly chosen Mega Drive games I have ever seen in a compilation. These are native ports of Echo the Dolphin, Golden Axe and Sonic Spinball done by Codefire, and once again these ports suffer from the same issues we had in the Phantasy Star collection. All the game's visuals are cropped from the original graphics, which means you get a smaller window on the action that requires a lot more scrolling, and in the case of Sonic Spinball, this gets hugely disorientating if you aren't already familiar with the maps. Golden Axe fares better, what with it being a fairly slow beat-em-up where you only really need to move to the right, but Echo also suffers greatly because the maps are large and require you to scroll in all directions to find hints and items. Also, the speed of the game means you'll be constantly colliding with enemies and hazards and losing health as a result. It's a miserable way to play any of these games, and on top of that, the sound and music is incredibly abrasive and crunchy. And that's your lot for this video. There's certainly more weird Sega games on the GBA to discuss, and I definitely want to do that in a future video. This early third-party era of Sega will always be a fascinating one, as it showcases a company trying to find its feet in a new world of developing for systems that aren't the company's own. Hopefully you'll return for another round of GBA Sega games in the future. Take care!